has become bringing treatments to rural areas that traditionally people in rural areas had to travel out of state to get. As you will see in some of the slides in my presentation, that has a great impact on our ability to provide state-of-the-art care to everybody, including the very important people who makes up our rural areas. So I hope you are in a mood for a really uplifting story that I'm going to call The Rise of the Cancer-Killing Cells in Idaho. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Thank you. So just to set the stage, I'm going to just spend a few words about how we cure cancer in the year of 2021. We have our classic cancer treatments, which usually are available everywhere where there is a medical center and there is an oncologist either on site or coming in certain days a week. And obviously, a very important classic cancer treatment is to cut the cancer away. That started sort of in the modern version back in the 18th century. But that only really works when you have a solid cancer, and we'll get into what makes a cancer solid or liquid, or if the cancers are located in a single or few areas of the body. If beyond that, surgery is usually not a good option. And so it's not practical in patients who have so-called metastatic, meaning many daughter cells around the body, or patients who have diffuse cancers, liquid cancers, which is what we call blood cancers. Chemotherapy, as we know it today, came into use around 910, 920, has evolved and has been a huge advance in the treatment of in particularly blood cancers, but many other cancers like breast cancer and colon cancer. But we have to remember that chemotherapy, as we traditionally understand it, is just a fancy word for poison, where we are choosing poison that hopefully is worse for the cancer cells than for the normal body cells. But it is poisons to the normal body cells as well. And what we have been trying to do over the past 20 years is to develop treatments that will make that kind of treatment, which is often very hard on the normal body cells, go into the sunset. And then since 1920 and to this date, radiation therapy has been an important part of many cancer treatments. Radiation works like destroying cancer tissue when it is in a specific location where you can direct the radiation ray without harming the normal body cells too much. And in some types of cancers, that can be curative. In other types of cancer treatment or cancer types, it's not really the best treatment. So since 2000, we have more and more put our faith into new cancer treatments that works better, are more effective, and less toxic. And basically, they go under the umbrella of what we call targeted treatment blocking cancer drugs. The first sort of category is what we call cancer gene or cancer enzyme blocking therapy. We call them small molecules because they are usually made up of small molecules. And actually all of them to date have been able to put into tablets so that this often very effective anti-cancer treatment is a tablet treatment only that patients can take at home. Second category are treatments or therapies aimed at worsening the environment that cancer cells have changed to thrive in. One of the things cancer cells are able to do as part of the evolution they have had is that they can change the environment around them, the environment around their genes, to facilitate them growing and doing all the bad stuff cancer cells do. And we call that epigenetic therapy. And that is also becoming a very important part of the many cancer treatments. And that can be given either as tablets, with some still having to be given intravenous. But even though they often are referred to as chemotherapy, they're very different from what we traditionally call chemotherapy, because this is not poison. This is precision medicine that goes in and do specific things to the cancer or the environment around the cancer and do very little harm to normal cells. And then also since 2000, we have increasingly used specifically developed antibodies. Antibodies are usually made when we get infected or we get a foreign body in our body. Some refer to them as magic bullets. They are made by the immune system, but over time, it's been possible to make these antibodies in the laboratory to specifically attack unique surfaces, built or antigens on the cancer cells, attack these cancer cells when infused into the patient, and then destroy them by combining that attachment to other immune cells that then will kill the cancer cells. And we refer to that as monoclonal antibodies. And because that is a protein-based medication, you can't take that as a tablet. It will be digested, and so it has to be given intravenously. And then what we're going to talk most about in the coming slides is the newest, most complicated new cancer treatments. And that's where the cancer killing cells come in. We also call that, or also known as cell therapy. There's sort of two parts to how this all developed, because the first part actually developed as early as 1980. Before we really understood everything we understand today, we did learn back then that if you put a healthy immune system into a cancer patient whose immune system obviously didn't prevent these patients from getting cancer, then those healthy immune cells could fight the cancer cells just like an immune system would fight an infection. And so that is what we call bone marrow transplant, stem cell transplant, blood stem cell transplant, many names, all the same thing. It's all about recognizing that the patient's immune system or bone marrow is not functioning properly, get rid of that system and put in a healthy system from a healthy donor. And then most recently, what really is a game changer and probably will become much more of a game changer in more and more cancers is what we call CAR T cells, which is genetically engineered cancer-fighting cells that through some very sophisticated engineering in the laboratory on a cellular level can be trained or dictated once they get back into the patient to seek out the cancer and then kill that specific cancer that the patient have. Since it's two treatments, the sort of first part and the second part that have much in common, I'm just briefly going to show you what the allogeneic donor blood stem cell transplantation or bone marrow transplantation or allohematopoietic stem cell transplantation, what that is about. So as mentioned, we have the patient with cancer whose immune system is not able to fight the cancer, and we have a healthy person with normal stem cells that give rise to both normal bone marrow cells that provides our blood cells and to normal immune cells. So the procedure is like following. You have your blood cancer patient. You have identified a suitable healthy donor. The blood cancer patient is prepared for the transplant by something we call a preparative regimen that usually consists of a combination of immune fighting drugs and chemotherapy, standard chemotherapy drugs, though we are moving towards using the immune fighting drugs much more and sometimes exclusively as again, to try and get away from these chemotherapy, these poisons that often have many ill effects on the patient. This is synchronized with a donor getting a bone marrow and immune cell stimulating injection that is quite innocuous and that is used commonly in a number of settings, and particularly to have patients recover their bone marrow function if it has been compromised by chemotherapy. And then the donor goes to an outpatient facility where the donor's blood is put through a very sophisticated machine that is able to spin the blood and line the cells in the blood up according to gravity. And we can push a button that tells the machine to take out the platelets if that's what we want, to take out a certain type of white cells, if that's what we want. We push the stem cell button, and then the machine will take out the band that contains the stem cells and put them up in a bag up here that then can be given to the patient. And that's
Dr.
how.
Peterson, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Your slides are not advancing. I'm not sure if you're advancing your slides, but they're not advancing.
Okay, where are we? What are you looking at?
So we're still looking at the first slide.
Oh no!
Yeah, but
Well,
it's okay.
there is a way that you can see it when you go down to the bottom. So I'm looking at all the slides.
Oh,
but
good.
you're
okay,
not
good.
advancing them.
Yeah, I took it on
just
to
wasn't-
the to the presentation mode. What are you looking at now? You're looking at the first slide? I'm here, so you know, here. Can you see that?
You can
Renee,
see
what-
all 12 slides if you just hit the,
the slide button.
So this one
I have-
doesn't do this one doesn't do anything for you.
It doesn't. Dr. Peterson, what slide are you on? And I will just advance you, and I'll pay attention and advance you.
Can you advance me?
Yes. What slide are you? I think.
I'm
What
on
do you
s-
all
You
see
tell us
now?
the slide
I'm slide
number.
7.
We can see them.
Slide 7. Okay. Can you let's see. Hang on one second. Oops. Can you see that? Are you on slide 7? Renee, do you see slide 7, or Dr. Bolander?
I see healthy donor and blood cancer patient. Is that slide 7?
Yes.
Do you
Perfect.
see anything else?
I see a
So-
gentleman without a shirt and a heart on his chest.
Okay, all right. So I have no control over this, and I don't know
That's
why
so
I don't have
strange.
control over it.
That's very
But
strange.
But if you can advance, then maybe we can get through this.
Perfect.
So
I will do that.
if you advance to the next click, what
Okay.
do you see 2 more pictures?
Yes, there are. I will, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to advance all 6 slides, and I'm just going to let you talk to this slide, and then it'll come so you can explain it. So the whole
Okay.
slide is up.
Okay, all right. So can you see my arrow?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So anyway, I don't know how much it made sense, everything I said in the beginning without the slides to look at. But basically, we are talking about how we are doing a so-called blood stem cell transplant or bone marrow transplant, where the idea is to replace the patient's immune system and often bone marrow system with a healthy donor's immune system and marrow system. We all have surplus of those stem cells that can make for that to grow in another person without doing any harm to ourselves. So the patient is prepared with what we call a preparative regimen that more and more is limited to be composed of immune suppressive medication so that the patient doesn't reject the stem cells and immune cells from the donor. And the donor is prepared. Can you see this injection? With an injection of a bone marrow and immune cell stimulating medication, all outpatient, all with minimal discomfort to the donor. The donor then have the cells collected from a sophisticated machine, also all outpatient. And can you see this? This is what the bag with the stem cells look like after we have finished the collection. This is all synchronized with the patient being prepared parallel with this so that the stem cells on the day of transplant are infused just like a blood transfusion into the patient. And that is actually the transplant. The transplant is the least of what we do to make this work, and can sometimes and not infrequently all be done in an outpatient setting for both the donor and the patient. Next slide. Do you see the next slide?
Yes.
All right. So here you should see a square with what the blood stem cell components that we infuse into to the patient are. And from the blood stem cells, we will get donor cells, donor immune cells that are able to kill the leukemia cells. We will get new donor immune cells that becomes the patient's new immune system. But we also get some mature donor immune cells that are not willing to be taught to behave in the new body and who will pick up the minute differences that we all have, no matter how close a donor we find, unless we are identical twins. And with those cells often able to attack normal tissue and create what we call graft versus host disease, which can be a significant complication that can be very difficult to control. So we do a lot of preemptive manipulation of these immune cells that comes from the donor. And our challenge after the transplant is to sort of find the yin and yang of getting enough graft versus tumor or cancer effect to cure the patient, but with sufficiently little graft versus host disease so that the patient doesn't get harmed from the procedure. And the goal, of course, is always to have the healthy donors' immune cells kill. Are we at the next slide? Can you see the slide that says goal?
Yes.
Okay, so our goal is obviously always to have the healthy donors' immune cells kill all of the patient's blood cancer cells. And depending on the patient's type of cancer, how advanced it is, the patient's age, other illnesses that could complicate the treatment, we are able to cure anywhere from 20 to 90% of patients who are sent to us because there is no other way to cure them once they come to us. And the average, if you take all of these diseases together and ask how many of your patients you see on an annual basis are cured by what you do, the answer right now is 50 to 60%. Next slide. The second part of the cellular therapy, the new and much more advanced, is these genetically engineered cancer fighting cells. It's called chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy, or CAR T cell therapy for short. Many of you may have read about them in the newspaper, in magazines and others, because of the perception that this technology is really revolutionizing how we may be curing a lot more cancers in the future. Next slide. So what is CAR T cell therapy? And why is it a potential game changer in the fight against cancers? And right now, it's especially well suited for advanced blood cancers, which is why we are in the front of working with this, because that's what we do in our program. We deal with exclusively advanced blood cancers. Well, to explain what it is, and again, I'm sorry that because I usually can flow this forward in a more logical way, but can you see this unique blood cancer cell here?
Yes.
Okay. So this is just a schematic. Well, it is actually a blood cancer cell, and much of it looks like a normal blood cell, but part of what makes it cancerous is that it develops antigens, or it develops proteins that often are expressed on its surface. And I often compare that to warts on our blood cells that makes the cell cancerous. And we are able now to take that little piece of the cell out that is very unique for the cancer and then purify it and inject it into a mouse where the mouse will deal with this as an intrusion of a bacteria or foreign cell or foreign body and start to make immune fighting cells against that particular piece of the cancer that's very specific for that patient's cancer. And start to make cells that attack that part of the cancer cell as well as antibody that attacks that part of the cell. Then it's possible in the laboratory to determine where in the mouse immune cell that made it able to do that, the gene changes have occurred, and it's possible to cut that gene out of the mouse genome and put it into what we call an innocuous bio transferred vehicle. These are usually viruses that, when they are in the wild, only attacks bacteria, but which can be very useful because we can put that piece of instruction about how to attack the specific patient-specific cancer. We can put that into that virus, and then we can harvest or remove some of the patient's defective but nevertheless alive immune cells and have that virus infect that cell and thereby put that piece of information that the cell didn't have because the patient got the cancer into the patient's nucleus. And then we can multiply these cells that all have that duplicates of that information piece and give the cells back to the patient, where the cells now, because of that piece of genetic instruction about finding the patient's unique cancer, can seek out every single cancer cell in the body and get rid of that cancer cell. So in the next slide, this has become the first biological medication that the FDA has approved because it is biological, and it has been approved to be used in patients who have advanced non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which constitutes about 6% of all our cancers, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is the kind of leukemia that in particular children get. Most are cured, but not all, and this CAR T cell may be able to cure a majority of those who can't be cured with standard treatment. And most recently, CAR T cell has been FDA approved to be used in patients with multiple myeloma, which also often is referred to as a bone marrow cancer because it does bad things to the bone marrow. There are many other clinical trials to see if it could work in other types of cancers, including acute myeloid leukemia, which is a much more common acute leukemia in adults. But the real meat, of course, is in the big solid cancers like breast cancer, lung cancer, brain cancer, colon cancer, because that's the 85% of all cancers, where the technique to develop these cancer-fighting cells has to be a little more complicated and sophisticated, but where there's no technical reasons that it will not happen, so that we will get CAR T cell for these types of cancers that, if not able to be cured up front, in most patients would destine them to die from that cancer. The results so far in where we do have the FDA approval is that the treatment can provide durable, complete responses, or what we call complete remission, which often is associated with a cure in 70% of patients treated or more. And most of these patients have failed other treatments and would be destined to die from that cancer had it not been from this CAR T cell treatment. So we started our allogeneic transplant program in 2018, and we were on track to start our CAR T-cell treatment to be offered in St. Luke's in Boise starting in 2020, but as with so many other things, COVID really put a wrench into that. But we are on track now to be able to offer it in November of 2021. The next slide shows you sort of the downside of these treatments, and this goes for both the transplant and the CAR T-cell therapy. They are very complex and needs quite a bit of ancillary expertise and investment in infrastructure. And they, for that reason and other reasons, they are extremely expensive treatments. They cannot be done for less than $600,000. And with just a few complications, the price tag can easily shoot up to $2 million per treatment. Because the cancers so far that are able to be treated with CAR T-cell are relatively rare, it has not really put a big burden on our insurance providers and on Medicare, who, because it's FDA approved, will pay for the treatments. But obviously, this could be a major issue if we get into the big cancers like breast cancer, where either the prices have to come down or there has to be some sort of ration because we're talking a huge amount of aggregate money. One of the reasons they can be so expensive is that there is a number of life-threatening complications that can happen with the treatment and after the treatment, and that requires prompt recognition and treatment by people who know what they're doing, with many of these treatments having their own high price tag. Patients are always basically required to stay within 60 minutes of the treating facility for a period lasting typically from 2 months if it's CAR T to 4 to 6 months if it is the bone marrow transplant, and to have a caregiver, 24/7 caregiver, living with them to make sure that they get their proper nutrition, drinking, come to appointments, and can alert the medical staff if there are complications that the patient may not, him or herself, readily recognize. So it requires a very sophisticated infrastructure and resource support, and it requires a highly skilled, specialized staff that all the time have to be on top of their game and up on the latest and greatest. And you can't just say, well, I have all these skills, I know how to do that. No, you have to prove that you can do this safely, and you are not allowed to do it, and you're not going to get Medicare or any insurance carrier to pay for it unless you have passed an exam for the team, which is what an accreditation process really is. So you have to be accredited by a accreditation agency in that field to be able to offer these treatments. And for this reason, these treatments are almost exclusively done in university medical centers, of which there are probably about 120 in the US, with a handful or a dozen of states who do not have a university medical center, Idaho being one of them, and we are probably not going to get any anytime soon, meaning that unless this can be done in Idaho, patients would have to leave Idaho and spend 2 to 4 to 6 months with a caregiver in a big city somewhere far, far away. So can we just do that then? Why do patients need access to have this kind of sophisticated treatment done in Idaho? Well, those of you, I hope not, who may have had a family member or a colleague or somebody who have needed this treatment and seen the hardship that's involved in getting out of state, away from their home and support system, to live in another place for months to get this treatment, will understand why there for a long time have been a push to see if there was some way we could do this kind of treatment in Idaho. So we are now at the slide bringing cell therapy to patients. Are we still on the same page?
Yes, I'm there.
Thank you. So the reason why we need to be able to offer this in Idaho is that there is an increasing number of Idahoans who will develop blood cancers, where the standard of care require that they receive cellular therapy, either the allo transplant or the CAR T cell therapy. That has to do with increasing indications. That has to do with us getting older and being more prone to get these kind of diseases, and that has to do with our incredible population growth that does not seem, to me at least, to be stopping anytime soon. And the more wildfires and price increases we see in California, the more we can expect that our population will grow here in Idaho, is my bias. Prior to 2018, as mentioned, all Idaho patients in need of these treatments had to go out of Idaho for 3+ months to get them. And furthermore, by 2015, from when all of this started back in the 1980s, hundreds of patients who went out of state to get this treatment returned to Idaho after the 3 months, but still had active, complicated after effect, which the general oncology practices model is not really well suited to take care of. We can't expect our community oncologists who needs to serve our patients with both breast cancer care, colon cancer care, lung cancer care, to also be experts in providing these very, very specialized kinds of treatment. So by 2015, it was recognized by those involved having to deal with these patients when they returned or sending them out, that the distance and the hardship on patients to make this happen just was too much for many of the patients. And it was known that at least more than 25% of patients who needed the treatment could be cured by the treatment if they went out of state to get it, would not get it, will make comments like, I can't afford it, insurance will not pay, I have no caregiver, I don't want to leave Idaho. And that gets me to what has become my passion, is to make sure that we serve those patients who are unable to move to another state for whatever reason, that we are able to offer this treatment, if not in their community, at least within reach from their community. And if you look at Fruitland, for example, that's right within where, if a patient needs this kind of treatment in Boise, they will be able to commute back and forth and sleep in their own bed rather than having to rent a place and be in Boise, as would happen if they went to Seattle, to Portland, or to Salt Lake City. So that brings us to the cell therapy program at St. Luke's Cancer Institute, because the momentum to realize all of this and to decide to invest in being able, in a non-academic center, to offer this treatment to Idahoans came together in 2015. And on this next slide, you see the path to how we got there. So in 2015, the decision was made. In 2016 to 18, staff was hired, staff was trained. A lot of the procedures required to be accredited to do these treatments were developed and practiced and put into place. Agreement with Idaho insurance providers was completed, and the final piece was me coming in April of 2018, enabling us, because everything was ready at the time, to do our first donor transplant or allo transplant on May 17 in 2018. So here you have, before 2018, the distance patients from Fruitland would have to travel. And here you have, after May 2018, the distant patients from Fruitland would have to travel to get the exactly same treatment. So to wrap this up, as far as the path to curing not only blood cancers, but all cancers, I predict, as do many, it's not my original thought, but I certainly agree with it, that the path to curing all cancers in the future will likely be paved with anti-cancer immune cells, probably through the CAR-T model with genetic engineering in the lab, and then do that to the patient's own immune cells, and then put those immune cells back into the patient to finish the job. However, it is clear that you can't cure everything or prepare patient probably to get the maximum benefit from the CAR-T without also giving other anti-cancer treatment. And so I think of the path being through CAR-T to be a path that's busy with cancer blocking drugs that makes traffic on that path mightily busy. However, whichever way we need to go to cure the maximum number of patients, and however busy that path may be or difficult, we are there to be the traffic cops and to make that all happen. And I also hope that I have convinced you that it is crucial that Idaho patients have access to increasingly complicated state-of-the-art treatments in state, so that they can remain in their community and render the benefit from their trusted local support system that we all know are an integral part of a successful treatment, not only of cancer, but many other diseases during, in particularly, our treatment, which is quite difficult. So we have been able to start it. We have been able to grow it. We will continue to need institutional and community donor support to retain and evolve an infrastructure and research activity in Idaho, not usually associated with regional medical centers or non-academic medical centers, but which we have been able to make work here. And we have done that because of an incredible support from within St. Luke's, but also because of an incredible support from thoughtful donors that very generously have supported some of the things that are more difficult to get funding for from within the St. Luke's system. And so this support has meant that since May 2018, we've been able to build and staff a nationally recognized cell therapy center at St. Luke's in Boise, Idaho. I have been to now several international meetings, including in Europe, and pushed on this idea that is not readily recognized in academic programs. And I know that because I've spent a good part of my life in academia, that don't push the mega centers in the big cities as the one and all at the expense of closing smaller programs in states and areas like Idaho. Because if you do that, you will kill patients, because a third of the patients will not be able to leave the state. So if you take the ability of the state to do the treatment away, you will kill probably more patients than what you will save by them having to go to this big fancy academic center. And this is a new way of thinking about how to bring these sophisticated treatments to patients. And I'm very happy by having spent as much time I have in academia and then spent as much time as I have building these type of programs in non-academic settings, like in Intermountain Healthcare down in Utah, and now at St. Luke's here in Boise, because it has really strengthened my belief that you have to be able to bring these therapies to the patients rather than the patients to the therapy. And so that is the uplifting story I hope that I have been able to sort of excite you with, because this is how the rise of the cancer-killing cells in Idaho has become a reality and will be available to Idahoans, hopefully for as long as that treatment makes sense to provide. So sorry about the technical snafus. I don't know why the team's menu looks different for me when it comes to sharing, but I hope that the message is received that I'm trying to give you. So thank you for your attention, and I hope there's time for a few questions.
Definitely.
Thank
Please
you so much
raise
for
your
that
hand
great
or ask away.
presentation.
Any questions?
How many patients have
Do
you
you
treated?
feel like you're, oh, go ahead.
How many patients have you treated since this program has started?
So we have treated 32 patients so far with an allogeneic transplant. Things slowed down for everybody during COVID because patients were reluctant to move to any hospital to get any treatment that required a long admission. And unfortunately, we're going to see the result of that with a higher mortality for a number of cancers. But hopefully, with vaccination at some point or herd immunity at some point, protecting enough people, we'll be able to get back. We did 14 in our first year, and then and we were on track to do more in the second year, but then COVID really slowed it down, and now it's picking up again. CAR T we have not done so far. We've sent those patients out of state, but we will start doing our first CAR T cell treatments in November of this year.
Okay, and what's the success rate of these 32 patients?
Our success rate, given that it's very small numbers, well, we can already now say they are not worse than any other reported outcome from larger medical centers. And in actually they're better, but we can't say that because of the small numbers. But there's no indication that we are not able to do it just as safe and as effectively as the larger centers. And that has to do with the accreditation process, because once you pass the accreditation and can show your peers that you have everything in place to perform the high quality care these treatments require, there is no reason to believe that it makes a difference where you have it done.
Thank you.
Dr. Bolander, did you have a question?
I was just wondering, are you guys fully staffed, or are you still looking for more support, doctors, nurses, and otherwise?
We are still looking for more support, and that's another thing that has made the growth that we could have had difficult, because all of the physicians who are trained in this particular fields are academically based. It usually takes somebody with affinity or roots in the Intermountain area to have them come to a non-academic setting and to do this. But we are on track. We have 2 open physician positions. We have filled one of them. And we hope we soon will be filling the other one with a candidate that we are currently negotiating with to come. And so we hope to close that loop. But it is a challenge at times, and it's not just a challenge within our area, it's a challenge within every disease area for treatments that usually require an academic infrastructure. We have been able to build that infrastructure, but obviously we are not able to build it like they do in an academic setting, meaning we don't have residents, we don't have fellows, and we have to do a lot more grunt work, so to speak, in our program than what is expected from the same physicians in academic settings, because there are residents and fellows that do that in those institutions. And that sometimes is a little deterrent to those who are used to the luxury of being in an academic setting. But there also are a large number of very dedicated people, in particular if they do have family or roots in what I call the Intermountain area, because those are the ones who can merge being close to family to being able to do what they otherwise would have to live far away from their family to be able to do. So it goes both ways, and we'll find the balance.
Thank you.
Just one question, and it will lead into what I'm going to talk really quickly about, Dr. Peterson. When do you think that we will be able to provide CAR T to children in Idaho?
It's a good question. We are collaborating with a pediatric program. There's technically no reason that the technical part of the treatment couldn't be done for children, but you have to have pediatricians to take care of the children. And those pediatricians and the program has to meet the standards that we have to meet for adults. And it has been more difficult, I think, for the pediatric to do that than it has for us, just because of the number of children that will need the treatment, which is far lower than adults needing this treatment. But we are definitely open to it. If the pediatrician has already approached us to see if they could be part of this, and we have invited them to be part of this, but we have also made it very clear to them what they need to accomplish within their own group to be able to meet the accreditation criteria, and that has given them somewhat of a pause.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Any more questions out there? Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Peterson. I'm so grateful to have you on board and to be bringing this amazing program to Idaho.
My pleasure. It's
Thanks, Ben.
I love doing this.
Good. Good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right. So you recorded this. I'm happy to make the slides available because it's going to be a little jumbled, isn't it, the recording?